It's 10:30 p.m. here in Paris, and time to take a closer look at one of the stories we've been covering this evening. This is apropos. Well, it's being viewed as a symbolic display of anger. North Korea has blown up northern sections of unused road and rail routes that once linked it with the south. Experts say the demolition, which came days after Seoul was accused of flying drones over Pyongyang, is viewed as a further rejection by Kim Jong-un of any possibility of reunification with South Korea. Clem Valor has the latest.
A methodical destruction of land and rail routes, once used for trade, undertaken by the North Korean military. In response, Seoul condemned the northern actions.
The government strongly condemns today's explosion of the two inter-Korean roads by North Korea, as it is a clear violation of inter-Korean agreements and very abnormal behavior. We cannot help but deplore North Korea's regressive behavior.
Pyongyang says Tuesday's latest show of anger is a result of the South flying drones over the capital with anti-regime leaflets. They have repeatedly accused Seoul of doing so this past month and threatened to respond with force if it happened again. In January, Kim Jong-un vowed to sever all ties with its neighbor, designating it as the principal enemy of the North, and abandoned the goal of peaceful Korean unification. South Korea has refused to confirm whether it sent drones, but warned that North Korea would face the end of its regime if the safety of South Korean citizens was threatened.
If the North Korean military tries to shoot down balloons or drones, their shells may fall into South Korean territory. In that case, South Korea will have to respond. This could unintentionally lead to full-out war, as both sides are promising to respond with an overwhelming show of force.
North Korea has a history of staging the choreographed destruction of facilities on its own soil as a political message. In 2020, it blew up an empty inter-Korean liaison office building just north of the border in retaliation of South Korean civilian leafleting campaigns. While in 2018, it demolished tunnels at its nuclear testing site at the start of its nuclear diplomacy with the United States.
To discuss this story further, we're joined now by Aidan Foster-Carter, Honorary Senior Research Fellow in Sociology and Modern Korea at Leeds University in the UK. Thank you so much, Aidan, for being on the programme with us this evening. You are a long-time expert on this region. North Korea does have a history of staging this kind of choreographed, as it were, destruction of facilities on its own soil as a political message. So is that simply what this was, a message?
Yes, I think so. And I'm very glad about the way you phrased it. Choreographed seems to me exactly right. Let's think for a moment what we've seen today, what it isn't. It is not the immediately preceding item. It is not the actual destruction, massive destruction of buildings in, say, Lebanon or what can cite Ukraine. This is not war. This is for show. In fact, North Korea, well, I could add another example, although they also have been sending thousands of balloons into South Korea, reprisal for the ones that activists sometimes send into the north. And these balloons sometimes carry something very nasty like feces, but more often just waste paper. I mean, this is bizarre and it's annoying and you kind of wish they wouldn't. But my goodness me, it's a lot better than what Kim Jong-un, their leader, threatens to do every other day, which is actually unleash his nuclear arsenal, his missiles, his artillery could pulverize Seoul. So it's symbolism. It's very silly. It is potentially dangerous, but thank God it's not the real thing, and I don't think it will lead to it.
Yeah, because we heard from one expert in that report concerned about the possibility of the situation escalating, but most observers say it's unlikely that the North is going to launch any kind of preemptive attack on the South. Why do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is the non-Hamas, isn't it? It's the opposite. What do you do if you seriously wish destruction on your enemies? You lull them into a false sense of security, you plan in absolute secrecy, and then you launch a deadly action as Hamas did a year and a week ago. What you do not do is saying, we're going to nuke you, and you do all this other stuff, I honestly think it's a substitute, and quite honestly, I don't wish to sound complacent at all. There are always risks in a situation like this. It could always be a tinderbox. But Kim Jong-un feels the need to be doing something, to show that he's doing something, perhaps to show his own people he's doing something, because, you know, they are poor and one day they will grow restive. So I think it is all a substitute for the real thing. But I must say, well, if I may, I wish that this South Korean government had the wisdom of its predecessors, including conservative ones, because the great thing, if you're the good Korea, as South Korea is, so to say, that's a bit of a shorthand, you don't rise to the bait. So, I mean, I understand that South Korea fired warning shots when these roads were blown up. Well, why? I mean, it's annoying. The South Koreans paid for these roads a couple of decades ago, but there wasn't a threat to South Korea. And we've got a rather militant president in South Korea. Obviously, it's all North Korea's fault. The original sin is North Korea. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, you know, we're sort of even balance at all. But there's a sort of wisdom and prudence not to overreact. And I very much hope the South Korean government will watch the North Koreans with their silly games and not do anything to make it worse.
Do you believe then that Seoul has perhaps been slightly provoking the situation?
Well, it all depends who you think launched this drone. Okay, to be sure, the North Koreans sent drones over South Korea last year. South Korea, first of all, denied it, then hasn't commented. And it looks like something that's a much bigger job than an NGO could mount. And it's all very peculiar, because again, we wouldn't know about this if the North Koreans hadn't trumpeted it on the front page of their own newspapers, including copies of the leaflets. And it's not too difficult. The website NK News has done this to sort of zoom in and see what they were doing. What were they doing? They were showing pictures of Kim Jong-un, the leader, with his $10,000 Swiss watch, his daughter Jue with her $1,000 or more Dior coat. And they were saying, guess how much food we could have bought with that? Why would the North Korean regime tell its own people what is in these leaflets? I mean, I have been watching this place a long time. I disavow being an expert. No one is an expert on North Korea. They make themselves very obscure. But it's pretty puzzling what both regimes are doing at the moment, to be honest.
And also, Aidan, there seems to be something of a cyclical trend when it comes to tensions on the peninsula itself, rhetoric being ramped up, then things seem to subside. But has the situation deteriorated over the course of the past year, do you feel?
Yes, I think it has. For example, a year ago, the North Koreans launched a spy satellite. Big deal. We know because they showed off their pictures. They were grainy, useless, black and white things, no military knowledge at all. But the South Korean government, in its wisdom, decided, oh, that's a breach of they shouldn't be doing that. And the South Korean government suspended part of an inter-Korean agreement that they had, which was very limited, but it did mean that you weren't allowed to do stuff at the border like the North Koreans have just been doing the other day, and you couldn't have military exercises. So that's an example. I think, again, I'm not I'm not saying they're the same. Of course, they're not the same. But I think there are some unwise things that the South Koreans have done where they could have been calming down the situation. But of course, I'm sure that some people will be watching this and saying, no, that's all wrong. But it's a matter of judgment, I think. You have to keep calm, keep your nerve, and let the North Koreans rant away like this.
And Aidan, just a final question. Russia said today that the treaty that it had signed with North Korea during the summer provides for strategic cooperation in all areas. How would a mutual defence clause in that agreement be put into practice? North Korea is being accused by the US of supplying missiles to Russia, also Zelensky saying that they've been supplying drones. So what does all of that actually mean?
Well, I happen to have an article in the South China Morning Post on this very topic, end of advert. It's very one-sided. Kim Jong-un fawns over Putin, my closest comrade, blah, blah, blah. But Putin is an old KGB man. He doesn't trust the North Koreans 1 inch. The sort of help that he's giving South Korea, we don't know exactly what it is, probably help with the spy satellite I mentioned. No way is he going to help North Korea's nuclear weapons or its intercontinental ballistic missiles. They could, in principle, threaten Russia and China as much as they threaten South Korea and Japan and the USA. So it's very one-sided. And again, I don't wish this all to sound complacent. There is always risk. But I think we shouldn't make too much of anything. Putin has his own fish to fry in Ukraine, let's put it that way. No way does he want to be dragged into a war in Korea, as the Soviet Union was by Kim Jong-un's grandfather in 1950.
Aidan, we leave it there for now, but we do really appreciate your time on the programme and for that very incisive analysis. That's Aidan Foster-Carter, Honorary Senior Research Fellow in Sociology and Modern Korea at the UK-based Leeds University. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that is it from us for now.